When you hear a news anchor say, Category 4 hurricane, or super typhoon, it sounds terrifying and dramatic. But here's the thing most people don't realize, those labels aren't just scary TV phrases. They're a life or death warning system, built from decades of science, engineering, and hard lessons from storms that changed history. Hurricanes and typhoons are not different kinds of monsters, they're the same type of storm, just named differently depending on where they form. In the Atlantic and Northeast Pacific, they're called hurricanes. In the Northwest Pacific, they become typhoons. In the Indian Ocean and parts of the Southern Hemisphere, you'll hear cyclone. Underneath all those names lies the same phenomenon, a tropical cyclone powered by warm ocean water and rotating winds. But when it comes to categories, Category 1, Category 3, Category 5, that's where things get really interesting. Those numbers aren't based on size, rainfall, or how scary the satellite image looks. They're built almost entirely on one thing, sustained wind speed. And yet, from that single number, emergency managers decide whether to close schools, evacuate cities, and move ships and planes out of harm's way. The categories are a kind of secret language between scientists and the public, simple on the surface, but hiding a complex story underneath. Today, we're unpacking that story, how hurricanes and typhoons are really categorized, what those numbers mean in the real world, and why understanding them could one day save your life. To understand why a Category 4 hurricane means what it does, we have to go back to the 1960s and 70s. Before then, storms were often described with vague phrases like severe or great, which didn't tell the average person much about what to expect. Enter engineer Herbert Saffir and meteorologist Robert Simpson, who teamed up to create a simple, 5-level scale linking wind speed with expected damage. Their system eventually became the Saffir-Simpson Hurricane Wind Scale, the one we still use in the Atlantic and Northeast Pacific today. It classifies storms that have already reached hurricane strength, meaning sustained winds of at least 74 miles per hour, 119 kilometers per hour, into 5 categories. Category 1 is the weakest, Category 5 is the most extreme. But remember, this is a wind scale. It doesn't directly factor in rainfall, storm surge, or flooding, even though those often cause the most deaths and damage. Still, the goal of the scale is beautifully straightforward. If you can tell people, in one number, what kind of wind damage to expect, they can make faster, smarter decisions. That's why, despite its limits, the Saffir-Simpson scale remains the gold standard for hurricane wind intensity in many parts of the world today. So what does each category actually mean? A storm officially becomes a Category 1 hurricane at 74 to 95 miles per hour, 119 to 153 kilometers per hour, sustained winds. On paper, that's the lowest category, but there is nothing small about it. At this level, shingles start peeling off roofs, gutters and siding rip away, large branches snap, and shallow-rooted trees can topple. Power lines may come down, causing outages that last for days. The danger with Category 1 storms is psychological. People see the 1 and think, oh, that's not so bad, but tropical systems are dynamic. A storm sitting at Category 1 over unusually warm water can rapidly intensify into something far stronger in less than a day. Recent research has shown that rapid intensification, storms suddenly jumping a category or more in under 24 hours, is becoming more common as oceans warm. When you hear Category 1, the correct response isn't no big deal, it's this is already a hurricane, pay attention. Step up just a little on the scale and you hit the Category 2 hurricane, with winds of 96 to 110 miles per hour, 154 to 177 kilometers per hour. That may not sound like a big jump, but in terms of destructive power, it's enormous. At this level, roofs can lose large sections of covering, many trees are uprooted or snapped, and poorly constructed or older buildings begin to suffer serious structural damage. Mobile homes and light structures are especially vulnerable. Power and water outages can last not just days, but weeks in harder-hit areas. Category 2 storms also bring more intense storm surge, the dome of seawater pushed inland by the wind, and higher waves along the coast. Even though surge isn't baked into the category number anymore, emergency planners know that as wind speeds increase, the surge risk tends to rise too. For many coastal communities, that rising water, not just the wind, is the line between inconvenience and catastrophe. Then we cross a crucial threshold, Category 3. At 111 to 129 miles per hour, 178 to 208 kilometers per hour, a storm is now considered a major hurricane. This is where the word devastating becomes literal. Well-built homes can lose large portions of their roofs. Many trees are snapped or uprooted entirely, blocking roads and slowing emergency response. Electricity and clean water can be out for weeks. For barrier islands and low-lying coasts, storm surge at this level can be life-threatening, pushing seawater far inland and flooding entire neighborhoods. Category 3 hurricanes often dominate headlines, not just because of the wind speeds, but because their damage footprints are so large. Recovery from a direct hit can take months, and the economic impacts can linger for years. When a storm forecast crosses that line into Category 3, that's when you typically see mandatory evacuations, empty supermarket shelves, and long lines at gas stations. The storm stops being just weather and becomes a full societal event. Above that lies the realm of Category 4 hurricanes, with sustained winds between 130 and 156 miles per hour, 209 to 251 kilometers per hour. At this level, the word catastrophic starts to show up in official forecasts. Most trees and many utility poles are snapped or uprooted, which can physically isolate entire communities. Well-built homes may suffer severe structural damage, roofs can be completely removed, and some exterior walls may fail. Storm surge can destroy coastal buildings and push water deep inland, eroding roads and cutting off escape routes. Emergency services may be unable to respond during the height of the storm. It's not that they don't want to help, it's that vehicles simply cannot drive in those winds, and debris in the air turns into shrapnel. Category 4 storms are the kind that people remember for the rest of their lives. And then, at the very top, sits the Category 5 hurricane, sustained winds of 157 miles per hour, 252 kilometers per hour, or higher. There is no upper limit on this scale. A storm with 175 miles per hour winds and a storm with 190 miles per hour winds are both simply Category 5. At this level, even modern, reinforced structures can be heavily damaged or completely destroyed. Entire neighborhoods may be flattened. Trees are stripped bare or uprooted entirely. Storm surge is often unsurvivable in low-lying coastal areas. Central pressures are so low and winds so intense that landscapes can be permanently altered. Recovery from a Category 5 isn't measured in days or weeks, but in years. Recently, as climate change has helped fuel warmer oceans and more intense storms, some scientists have even suggested adding a new Category 6 to describe storms with winds above about 192 miles per hour. Their argument is that the open-ended nature of Category 5 doesn't fully communicate how much more dangerous these ultra-intense storms really are. It's still just a proposal, but it shows how our tools may need to evolve as the planet changes. So that's hurricanes. What about typhoons and that intimidating phrase, super typhoon? In the Northwest Pacific, storms are governed by agencies like the Japan Meteorological Agency, JMA, and the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, JTWC. A storm becomes a typhoon when its sustained winds reach roughly the same threshold as a hurricane, around 74 miles per hour. But instead of using the Saffir-Simpson categories, different labels are used, such as typhoon, severe typhoon, and violent typhoon, often based on slightly different wind measurement methods. The term super typhoon is where things match up more directly with the higher hurricane categories. The JTWC uses super typhoon for storms with sustained winds of at least 150 miles per hour, 240 kilometers per hour, the equivalent of a strong Category 4 or Category 5 hurricane. In other words, when you hear super typhoon, think, this is as bad as the very strongest hurricanes on Earth. Different weather agencies around the world tweak their scales and terminology, but the purpose is always the same. Take a complicated, chaotic natural event and translate it into something the public can understand in a single glance. Whether it's Category 4 hurricane or super typhoon, the message is universal: the winds are extremely dangerous, act now. There's another layer to this story, though. The names themselves, hurricane, typhoon, cyclone, carry centuries of history and culture. Hurricane likely comes from hurricane, a storm god in the traditions of the Taino people of the Caribbean, while typhoon may trace back through Arabic and Chinese words for violent storms. Over time, these regional terms stuck, and today they quietly remind us that people everywhere, from the Caribbean to the Philippines, have been wrestling with these storms long before satellites and computer models existed. And today, even with better forecasting and powerful technology, the category system still has limits. A weak Category 1 can cause catastrophic flooding if it moves slowly and dumps enormous amounts of rain. A Category 2 storm hitting a crowded city can cause far more damage than a Category 4 that grazes an unpopulated coastline. That's why meteorologists constantly stress, don't fixate only on the category number. Listen for warnings about rainfall, flood risk, and storm surge as well. So why should any of this matter to you if you don't live near Hurricane Alley or typhoon-prone coasts? Because these categories tell a bigger story. They show how humans take something wild and unpredictable and try to tame it with simple tools, numbers, labels, and color-coded maps. Behind every category upgrade, there's a chain of events: satellites tracking clouds, instruments measuring wind, supercomputers running models, and meteorologists translating all of that into a warning that a family can understand in 10 seconds. Knowing the difference between a Category 1 and a Category 4 isn't just trivia. It can shape whether people decide to board up windows, move their car to higher ground, or evacuate entirely. It can decide how governments pre-position supplies, where hospitals set up backup power, and how early schools and airports shut down. The categories may look like simple numbers on your screen, but they are the product of thousands of storms, and the lessons learned from every life saved and every life lost. Wherever you live, near the Atlantic, the Pacific, or halfway around the world, understanding what these categories really mean gives you power. The power to interpret the news, to recognize when a storm is more serious than it sounds, and to respect nature instead of underestimating it. So next time you see the words Category 3 hurricane or super typhoon flash across your phone, you'll know, that's not just dramatic language. It's a code that tells you how hard the wind will fight, how high the sea might rise, and how seriously you should act. Stay curious, stay prepared, and above all, stay respectful of the forces that shape our world. Thanks for watching. If you have an idea for another storm-related mystery, maybe why hurricanes get human names, or how radar can see through rain, drop your suggestion in the comments, and we might feature you in a future episode. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Hurricane vs Typhoon, what the categories really mean, check out our other bingeable stories here, where we uncover the surprising science and history hiding inside everyday words, objects, and ideas.